In his painful budget on Tuesday, Dan Andrews slapped Victorian landlords with an additional tax slug. Even though experts have warned that such a tax would leave investors with no choice but to pass the expense onto their tenants, accelerating the rental crisis. Now, adding fuel to the fire, the Andrews government is now reportedly considering introducing rent caps across the state.
You own land. Government rezones it overnight. Your land value jumps $600,000. You celebrate. Then the tax bill arrives. $300,000. Due in 30 days. You don't have it. You haven't sold, haven't developed, haven't made a cent. But Victoria demands $300,000 cash. Or they charge interest, 6.72% annually, compounding, until you sell, or for 30 years. Whichever comes first. Welcome to Premier Jacinta Allen's Windfall Gains Tax. Started July 1st, 2023. Charging landowners up to 50% of value increases from government rezoning. Property Council says it's killing development. Urban Development Institute demands abolition. Industry experts warn housing approvals plummeting, investor confidence collapsed. And Allen's 800,000 homes by 2034? Already impossible. Because the tax meant to fund infrastructure is destroying the housing supply needed to reach the target. Allen's $300,000 tax bomb. May 2021. Victorian Treasurer Tim Pallas announced Windfall Gains Tax, designed to capture unearned land value from government rezoning. Pallas argued landowners shouldn't profit from government planning decisions. Rezoning land from rural to residential could increase value millions. Government should capture that windfall. Fund infrastructure. Schools, hospitals, roads. Sounds reasonable until you understand how it works. Windfall lens. Tax charges 50% on land value increases above $500,000 from rezoning. For increases between $100,000 and $500,000, effective rate is 62.5% on amount exceeding $100,000. Tax applied when land rezoned, not when sold, not when developed, when rezoned. Example, your land worth $1 million. Government rezones it, new value $1.6 million, value uplift $600,000, tax bill, $300,000, payable within 30 days, or deferred with 6.72% annual interest, until you sell, or 30 years, whichever first. But here's the problem, you haven't received $600,000, haven't sold land, haven't developed it, just own it. Value increased on paper, but Allen demands $300,000 cash. Most landowners don't have it, forced to defer, pay interest every year, watch tax bill compound. By time they sell, tax bill grown to $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. Tax started July 1st, 2023. By January 2026, industry screaming. Urban Development Institute pushing for abolition. Property Council demanding reform. Developers warning projects no longer feasible. The developer hit with $2.3 million bill. Marcus owns 15 hectares near Melton. Bought it in 2018 for $4.5 million. Rural zoning. Used for agriculture. December 2024, Melton Council rezoned precinct. Marcus's land moved from farming zone to residential growth zone. Suddenly worth $9.2 million. Value uplift, $4.7 million. State revenue. Office cent assessment. Windfall Gains Tax, $2.35 million. Due February 2025, 30 days. Marcus didn't have $2.35 million. Land still undeveloped. No income from it. Still paying council rates, maintenance costs, insurance, now owing $2.35 million to state. Marcus applied for deferral, approved, but interest charged at 6.72% annually. That's $157,920 first year. Every year until he sells or develops. Marcus planned to develop land, subdivide into 200 residential lots, sell to builders, but construction costs up 50% since COVID, feasibility tight, adding $2.35 million plus accumulating interest, destroyed viability. Marcus approached banks for development finance. Banks saw $2.35 million, windfall gains tax liability ranking ahead of their mortgage. First charge on land. Banks refused financing. Too risky. Marcus approached private equity. Same answer. Nobody wants to finance development with government holding first charge. Marcus now trapped. Can't develop, can't finance, can't sell without taking massive loss. Interest accumulating, tax bill growing. After 3 years at 6.72%, $2.35 million becomes $2.85 million. After 5 years, $3.2 million. After 10 years, $4.5 million. By time Marcus sells, he'll owe more in tax than land is worth. How the tax kills housing supply. Property Council of Victoria warned Windfall Gains Tax pushing development projects out of feasibility. Many sites earmarked for residential construction shelved or restructured. Planning permits left dormant or resold. Here's why. Developer buys land for housing. Pays market price reflecting rezoning potential. Government rezones. Value increases. Developer hit with Windfall Gains Tax. Adds $2 million, $3 million, $5 million to project costs. Must pass costs to buyers. Final house prices jump $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 per dwelling. But buyers won't pay. Interest rates at 6.8%, house prices already unaffordable. Adding Windfall Gains Tax makes projects dead on arrival. Developer can't pre-sell, can't get financing. Project cancelled, land sits empty. Housing supply falls. Charter Keck Kramer data shows Melbourne apartment completions at 10-year low, 2,031 units in 2025, down 53% from 2024. Urban Development Institute submission warns Victoria's housing crisis at tipping point. Housing approvals have plummeted, investor confidence has collapsed, and the rental market is in crisis. Industry experts unanimous. Windfall Gains Tax must go. Property Council calling for abolition. Urban Development Institute demanding repeal. But Allen refuses. Tax now crucial revenue source. Victorian debt hit $187.8 billion. Government desperate for cash. Can't afford to lose Windfall Gains Tax revenue, even if it destroys housing supply. The numbers don't lie. Victoria's property tax blowout now accounts for nearly half of all state revenue. Figure includes stamp duty, land tax, windfall gains tax, vacant residential land tax, targeted levies. Government reliance on property-based taxes unsustainable in cooling market. For foreign investors, increased surcharge and annual absentee owner taxes had chilling effect. Estimated 25% decline in offshore interest since 2014. Victorian Property Settlements report steep taxation regime, making Victoria least attractive state for property investment. Meanwhile, Allen's 800,000 homes by 2034 target already off track. Victoria needs 80,000 new homes annually. 2024 delivered only 51,368. Shortfall of 28,632. That's 36% failure rate. Year 1. Apartment approvals near 20-year low. Just 567 units approved latest quarter. Townhome approvals at decade low 2,035 units. Property Council research shows Melbourne completions at historic lows. Sydney commencements, half long-term average. Brisbane projected to deliver less than 40% of 15-year average over next 4 years. Rising construction costs, labour shortages, financing challenges all weighing on supply. But Windfall Gains Tax making everything worse. Adding uncertainty, adding costs, adding complexity. Developers now factor massive tax bills into feasibility. Most projects no longer stack up. Land sits undeveloped. Housing crisis deepens. 5 reasons the tax backfired. Reason 1, tax charged when land rezoned, not when sold. Landowners hit with bills they can't pay. Forced to defer with compounding interest. By time they sell, tax bill grown exponentially. Destroys development feasibility. Reason 2, tax ranks as first charge on land, ahead of mortgages. Banks won't finance developments with government holding first priority. Private equity same. Nobody wants to be subordinate to state tax charge. Projects can't get funding. Reason 3, tax adds massive upfront costs. Developer buying rezoned land now factors Windfall Gains Tax into price, but also adds tax to project costs. Double hit. Makes projects commercially unviable. Reason 4, valuation uncertainty. Valuer General determines pre- and post-rezoning values. Landowners have 60 days to object. Short time frame. Complex process. Most accept valuations, even if too high. Results in excessive tax bills. Reason 5, tax doesn't fund infrastructure in area rezoned. Goes to consolidated revenue. Government spends it anywhere, on anything. Suburban rail loop, big build, budget deficits. Nothing returns to community-bearing rezoning impacts. Developers and landowners pay. Community gets nothing. The exemptions that don't help. Residential land up to 2 hectares exempt. Sounds good, until you realize most development land exceeds 2 hectares. Marcus's 15 hectares near Melton, fully taxable. Developers buying 10, 20, 30 hectares for subdivisions, fully taxable. Charities can get waiver. If land used for charitable purposes for 15 years continuously. Change use before then? Tax applies. Most charities can't guarantee 15-year use. Exemption useless. Some rezoning excluded. public land zones, rural zones, urban growth zones within GAIC areas, but residential growth zones, commercial zones, industrial zones, all taxable. Exactly the zones needed for housing. Land owned by universities exempt if revenue used for charitable objectives. But private developers, private landowners, no exemption, no relief. Full tax. Residential land exemption means family homes under 2 hectares not taxed. But that was never the concern. Concern is development land. Land that will become housing. That land gets hammered. $300,000, $500,000, $2 million, $5 million bills. Destroying supply. What Allen should do: abolish windfall gains tax entirely. Urban Development Institute. Pushing this. Property Council supporting. Tax killing housing supply. Revenue not worth destruction. Victoria needs housing, not another tax on development. If abolition impossible, reform tax structure. Charge tax when land sold, not when rezoned. Landowner receives money, can pay tax, doesn't need to defer, doesn't accumulate interest, makes tax manageable. Remove first charge status. Tax shouldn't rank ahead of mortgages. Banks need first priority to finance developments. Make windfall gains tax subordinate to development finance. Projects can proceed. Create exemptions for residential development. If land rezoned for housing, exempt first 50 or 100 dwellings from tax calculation. Encourages residential construction. Supports housing targets. Direct revenue to affected communities. Don't put tax in consolidated revenue. Use it to fund infrastructure in areas being rezoned. Roads, schools, parks, community benefits. Landowners pay. Community receives. Fair exchange. Extend objection timeframe. 60 days too short. Valuations complex. Evidence gathering takes time. Give landowners 90 or 120 days to object. Ensures fair assessments. Where this disaster ends. Best case, Allen announces reforms. Abolishes first charge status. Delays tax until sale. Creates residential development exemptions. Projects become viable again. Housing supply increases. Crisis eases slightly. Worst case, Allen doubles down. Keeps tax as is. Revenue too important. Victorian debt too high. More developers abandon projects. More land sits empty. Housing approvals collapse further. 2026 sees even fewer completions than 2025. Rental crisis explodes. Families homeless. Social unrest. Realistic scenario: Allen makes minor adjustments, extends objection timeframe, tweaks valuation methodology, but keeps tax structure intact. First charge remains. Tax on rezoning continues. Development feasibility stays destroyed. Housing supply stays constrained. Victoria's 800,000 homes target missed by 400,000 or more. Marcus near Melton sits on land he can't develop, can't finance, can't sell. Tax bill compounding. After 5 years, owing $3.2 million. Land barely worth that. He'll lose everything. Decades of work, retirement savings, gone. Because Allen's tax-grabbed windfall that never existed in cash. The breakdown Allen won't admit. Windfall Gains Tax started July 1st, 2023. Charges up to 50% on land value increases from rezoning. Marcus near Melton hit with $2.35 million bill. Can't develop, can't finance, trapped. Tax bill compounding at 6.72% annually. Property Council, Urban Development Institute, Charter Keck. Kramer all confirm the damage. Tax killing development feasibility, projects shelved, land undeveloped, housing supply collapsing. Melbourne apartment completions at 10-year low. 2,031 units. Victoria needs 80,000 new homes annually. Delivered only 51,368 in 2024. Property tax now accounts for nearly half state revenue. Government reliant on taxing development, but taxes destroying development. Vicious cycle. Allen's 800,000 homes by 2034, already impossible, because the tax meant to fund infrastructure is killing the housing needed to reach the target. This is how Premier Jacinta Allen's windfall gains tax backfired. When you charge landowners $300,000 for value increases they haven't received, development stops. When tax ranks ahead of mortgages, financing disappears. When feasibility destroyed, housing supply collapses. And when housing supply collapses, crisis deepens. Allen refuses to abolish the tax. Industry demands reform. More projects will halt, more developers will walk away, more Victorians will suffer. Hit subscribe to see what happens next.